Okay, so we are into Unit 2, Lesson 3, and this lesson concerns postulates and diagrams. So, postulates are rules that we accept without proof. So, postulates are basically accepted properties that we have talked about from the beginning of the year, but today we're going to formally put some names on them, and we are going to use them to help us read diagrams. And this is an important skill in geometry. So today we're going to determine what can be assumed from a diagram and what needs to be labeled. So here I give you a list of postulates. I do not expect you to memorize these postulates. What I expect you to be able to read these postulates and understand what they mean. So the first two postulates talk about lines and points. So the first postulate, the 2-point postulate, says through any 2 points there exists exactly one line. So there's an example of that on the right. Through the points A and B there is exactly one line, and we label that line L. So that's the 2-point postulate. The line-point postulate is kind of the reverse of that. Okay? A line contains at least 2 points. So if I have a line, I know that it contains at least 2 points. So those two postulates concern lines and points. Postulate 2.3, it's the line intersection postulate, and all that says is if two lines intersect, then their intersection is exactly 1 point, which makes sense. And there's an example of it to the right. The next postulate concerns points and planes. So the 2.4 says, through any 3 non-collinear points, meaning through any 3 points that aren't all part of the same line, there exists exactly one plane. So we see how there's D, E, and F. Since they're all not part of the same line, they create a plane, and it is labeled plane R. So conversely, the plane point postulate says, if we have a plane, we know that plane consists of at least 3 non-collinear points. So if I have plane R, I can assume it contains 3 points that aren't all part of the same line. Okay? Next postulate talks about a plane and a line. It says if 2 points lie in a plane, then the line containing them lies in the plane. So it kind of connects planes and lines and points all together. But it's just saying if 2 points are on a plane, then the line that contains those points is also in the plane. And there's an example of that to the right. And then finally, the plane intersection postulate. What that says, it says that if 2 planes intersect, they intersect at a line. So this is just reiterating, when 2 planes intersect, they intersect at a line. So these are all properties that we've dealt with before. They're just putting a formal name on them and being able to recognize those. So again, don't worry about memorizing all these postulates and their names. All we're going to do is practice knowing how to identify them. So you're going to be flipping back to this page quite a bit in the diagram on this page and look for an example that shows if 2 lines intersect, they intersect at a point. That would be this line intersection postulate. Okay? So we go back. Which one shows planes intersecting at a line? Well, that would be 2.7, the plane intersection postulate. A few examples. So in example 1, it says, state the postulate illustrated by the diagram. So what this part A says, it says if we have 2 lines that intersect, then they intersect at that single point. So you would want to flip back to your here, and we write out, this is the line intersection postulate. And to me that makes sense because those lines are intersecting, okay? So if we look at part B, it says if I have 2 planes crossing each other, it shows these planes crossing or intersecting at a line. So if we look back to our diagram with all these postulates, so this would be the plane intersection postulate. all right? So it's just going back to those and recognizing the postulate when it's being applied. Again, you don't have to memorize the names. I just want you to be able to pick them out, okay? So here, instead of me giving you a diagram to read and give a postulate, I'm giving you an example of the postulate and telling you to find an example of that from the diagram. So for the first one, the plane point postulate. An example of that. The plane point postulate, and I'm going to look at my diagram to remember, the plane point postulate says a plane contains at least 3 non-collinear points. So an example of that would be me saying a plane, one of these planes, contains 3 points, not all part of the same line. So my example of that I'm going to include, I'm going to say plane P contains points A, B, and C. So that's all the plane point postulate says, is that a plane contains 3 points, not all part of the same line. Okay? The next postulate we're going to identify here is the plane line postulate. Okay? And again, we go back to that plane line postulate. What that says, it says if 2 points lie in a plane, then the line containing them lies in the plane. So the way I would describe this one, I would say points A and B lie in plane P. So since A and B lie in plane P, that means that line N lies in plane P also. So all it is applying the postulate and getting an example of that postulate from the diagram. So throughout this example, I had my notes to the side, and I was flipping back to that list of postulates, and I was picking out how to tell what that postulate means and how to pick an example from the diagram. Okay? So you're going to get some practice doing that in this guided practice. So I want you guys to take a second. I'm going to pause here, and you're going to hopefully pause the video, work through these, and then check through what you get as solutions with me. Okay, so to explain this, in this guided practice number 1, it says, use the diagram in example 2, which postulate allows you to say that the intersection of plane P and plane Q is a line. So again, I went back to my first page in this lesson's notes, and I looked for anything that talked about intersection of planes is a line. And that was that plane intersection postulate. So that's why I could say that. All right? So the plane intersection postulate says when 2 planes intersect, that intersection is a line. And then number 2, you're doing 3 different ones. The 2-point postulate, we go back, we look at it. It says through any 2 points there exists exactly one line. So I'd say line N passes through points A and B. So I would just say through any 2 points there exists a line. Line N exists because it passes through points A and B. The line point postulate, that would be saying a line contains at least 2 points. So line N contains at least 2 points, A and B. It contains A and B. And then for part C, it says line intersection postulate, and that line intersection postulate is straightforward. If 2 lines intersect, they intersect at 1 point. We can see lines N and M intersect at point A. So it's just me picking an example of the postulate from that list. So if I gave you a quiz, checkpoint, stuff like that, you guys can obviously use this list of postulates. I'm not going to force you to memorize that. That would be insane. Okay? So what I'd like you guys to do now is to move on to the next part of this lesson, and then you're going to come back for examples 3 and 4. It's going to be a shorter video, but I want you to practice naming these postulates and just picking them from the list so you can move on to the next part of the lesson.